Hello there, I'm Gary, welcome to the channel, welcome back if you've been here before. In today's video I'm going to be making this, the Hawker Tempest V in 1/72 scale from Kovozavody Prostejov. Apologies to any Czech viewers if I've messed up the pronunciation, I promise I'll just call it KP from now on. I'll have a reprise of the history of the Hawker Tempest. Then I'll show you what you get inside the box. I'll show you how I've made the kit. And then, most importantly for some of you I'm sure, I'll compare it with the Airfix kit I made recently at the same scale. Now all of these sections come as chapters, so you can just hop backwards and forwards as your heart desires. If you enjoy the video, and I hope you do, then please do remember to subscribe to the channel by clicking on the logo down there in the bottom right. And if you really like what we're doing here, then you might want to give some thought to supporting future productions. You can do this through Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, and links to those are in the information box below. So let's make a start with a look at the history of the Hawker Tempest. The Hawker Tempest was conceived to address issues encountered in the earlier Typhoon, especially its poor high-altitude performance. The new aircraft used a thinner laminar flow design of wing, with sufficient other changes to warrant a new name. The Air Ministry ordered 6 prototypes with various engine configurations. The Tempest I had an APA Sabre 4 engine, but with the radiator in the wing instead of under the chin. The Tempest II was fitted with the Bristol Centaurus radial engine. The Tempest III and IV were both intended for the Rolls-Royce Griffon, as used in later marks of Spitfire, the Tempest III having a contra-rotating propeller, and the Tempest V had the Sabre II engine with the chin radiator. The Tempest V prototype was the first to fly in September 1942. Originally it had a car-style hinge door and a framed canopy. This was soon disposed of in favour of a clear bubble canopy. The first production Tempest IV flew in June 1943. The first squadron to be equipped was No. 3, closely followed by 486 Squadron Royal New Zealand Air Force and 56 Squadron RAF. Together these formed 150 Wing, in 1944 based at RAF Newchurch in Kent under the command of Roland B. Beaumont. B would later find fame as a test pilot for English Electric, notably of the Canberra, the Lightning and the TSR-2. Duties of 150 Wing included high-altitude fighter sweeps and long-range interdiction strikes into enemy-held territory. In June 1944 the Germans unleashed the V-1 flying bomb. The Tempest proved extremely valuable in shooting these down, either with cannon or by tipping their wings over so that they fell out of the sky. Tempest Vs continued to fly as part of 2nd Tactical Air Force for the remainder of the war, attacking German rail and road communications and shooting down high-performance enemy aircraft such as the Me-262 fighter. By the end of the war some 800 Tempest Vs had been built, yet only 3 survive. 2 are currently in restoration, one hopefully to flying condition, and another may be seen in the RAF Museum in Hendon, North London, in its post-war use as a target tug. Straight off you're struck by the box art by Carlos Alonso, one of the busiest artists in the industry I'd say, with 5 boxings of this kit alone, not mentioning the Mark II and Mark VI kits as well, all released in the space of 2 years. The box opens at one end, and inside is a bag with all the things we need to make the kit. First of all is the instruction sheet, small and flimsy and I must say not the most helpful at times. Many of the parts are not well drawn and are ambiguous about where and how they fit, but I'm sure I'll manage. Then there's the decal sheet, we'll come back to that in a little while, and then there are the parts. 2 sprues of grey plastic and 1 clear one for the transparencies. The plastic looks clean and quite well formed with no obvious flash or underfills. You can see how the fuselage and the engine cowling come as separate parts, allowing them to re-engineer the kit for other versions very easily. There are no part numbers on sprues. Refer to the manual for those, although I often will write them onto the sprue myself. With the decals there are no stencils or stripes, so it's a much smaller sheet than the Airfix kit, although it has markings for 3 aircraft. The colours are okay, a little underprinted so the density doesn't shout out at you, and there is a small misalignment with the white undercoat. One error is that the rank badge here is for a wing commander and should be triangular. The one at the bottom is for an air marshal and is correctly a rectangle. The scheme layouts are on the back of the box, the top one for B. Beaumont's aircraft from 150 wing, the second for an aircraft of 486 New Zealand Squadron, also part of 150 wing as it happens, then finally this Silver Wings version flown by Air Marshal Sir Roderick Hill in 1947. Onto the build, and the first thing I'm going to do is repair a piece of the undercarriage that was broken in my kit. I can just bend the part back into place with tweezers, then apply some ultra thin cement. I won't be needing this bit for ages, so it can be left to set properly. Next I'm going to prepare some of the parts by spraying them on the sprues. Some interior green for the inside of the wheel well and the cockpit parts. I'm spraying aluminium on the inside of the cockpit, on the instrument panel and on the wheel hubs. The insides of the cockpit then get a coat of black, which I can take off selectively with a cotton bud to reveal the metal as highlights below. I can do the same thing on the instrument panel. On the instruments I can add a few bits of white, then a few spots of random yellow and red for effect. I'll add some black to the top of the control column, and I give a black wash to the inside of the wheel well and to the wheel hubs. The reflectors for the lights get some silver on them. On to start assembly. This rear bulkhead I've pre-painted and washed. The seat is black and leather and sits onto the frame. The frame then joins the floor panel. The control stick goes in, along with a couple of levers, one on each side. The cockpit section can then go into one half of the fuselage. Then the instrument panel sits in place, and we must remember the box structure of the tail wheel well at the same time. On the other side of the fuselage is this trim wheel. Then the two halves of the fuselage can go together. I think the parts go together pretty well, although you do have to keep checking the alignments. Whilst that's taped up and drying, I've got other jobs to do, like making spray masks for the wheels. I simply put some masking tape on the wheel and cut very gently around the hub. Job done. Next is the radiator. First, the front of the radiator joins the top panel, then this scoop shape fits on it too. There's a small fillet piece here for the front, then the whole assembly can go into the engine housing. Now, I will say I found this quite tricky. Maybe I didn't read the instructions in the way KP intended, but it took me quite a while to get everything set in place. However, eventually I did, and I could leave the two halves of the engine cowling together to set. Onto the wings then, and the first job is to put the walls into the undercarriage bays on the lower wing skins. The wing roots need these fillets installed. In the Mark II, these spaces will be for the radiator and oil cooler. Of course, on the Mark V, these are under the nose. The barrels for the 20mm cannon can go into. The outer barrels project out farther than the inner ones, but the model makes no reference to this. Then the lamp covers can go into position in the wings. They're a tight fit, so might not really need much glue at all. That done, the wing halves can go together and then get taped up to set. The alignment's okay, but you do need to keep checking those leading edge fillets. Next, the engine can go onto the front of the fuselage, and when that's set, the wings can go on too. Now, I found there was a huge gap in the wing roots that needed filling in. Next to go on is the gun sight. The instructions say I should cut a 2 by 1.5mm bit of acetate to put on as the glass, but I won't bother. Now the propellers, and I've sprayed them aluminium earlier, and now I'm painting with black. You can later rub the front edges of the props to give a weathered look. Next on goes the windscreen and canopy, secured with some contactor clear. I've cut my own masks from bits of masking tape. So when everything's dry and set, I can add a coat of primer and start on the paint job with the invasion stripes. If you want them, you've got to do them yourself in this kit. And while the white's drying, I'll add white tips to the propellers and then finish them with yellow. So I've masked off the white. Now I'm adding the pale blue band around the tail. I'll also spray on the yellow for the leading edges. When dry, all of this will be taped off too. Then the underside gets a coat of medium sea grey. When it's dry, tape up the undersides and spray ocean grey onto what is left of the upper surfaces. Finally, the camouflage. I like to mark out the edges with thin tape and then fill in with larger pieces. Just mask off the bits you want to keep grey. You could of course just cut larger tape with the right patterns. Maybe I'll try that next time. And then the dark green can be sprayed on. When it's done, put the kit away for a while, maybe overnight, for all the paint to properly settle in. Then the big reveal. I love this bit. Check out any edges for build-up that might need to be sanded back with very fine wet sandpaper, or any missing bits you can touch up with a brush. And the last thing I have to do now is the black of the invasion stripes. With the main paint finished, I can start on the decals. These are okay. I don't think the colour is as dense as a cartograph, and they do have a habit of creasing at the edges, but they're not too bad. With all the area around the tail done, I can add the tail planes or horizontal stabilisers, and I've pre-painted them. I've also painted the exhausts in burnt iron. They can slot into place now. Next is the undercarriage. Now both main legs have the same part number in the instructions, even though they're not identical. So to make sure you've got the alignment right, when the stub axle points outwards, the little triangle bit is at the back, which is above the curved edge of the door. I found them tricky to get aligned firmly. Again, maybe I wasn't doing something right. When the main legs are set, the wheels can go on. With all that drying, I'll assemble the propeller. The prop has an axle that goes through the back plate, and then the spinner just fits on top. The exposed edge of the back plate I'll paint black later on. Back to the gear now, and this actuator arm goes in first, set up against the leg. Then the whole thing slots into the wing. It isn't made exactly clear where the actuator is supposed to sit, so put it wherever looks right for you. I found that the main leg lacked a lot of support. They really could have made this a lot more secure. The tail wheel goes in as well. Again, its exact placement is a bit of a mystery from the instructions. Then I can add the gear doors. Now the right angle of the door sits at the back, and the tiny slot that's there needs to be vertical. Then it's the right way round. There are also tiny door pieces that go next to the main legs as well. The tail wheel doors can go on too. There are no tabs to help alignment, so just do what you can. Then some other bits, the pilot's stirrup for getting in and out, and the IFF aerial. Now both of these really could have done with a pre-drilled hole. Anyway, when they're on, the prop can go on as well, the masks can come off, and the kit is finished. Right, the first thing to notice is the engine exhausts. Now in the KP kit, this comes as one part on each side. The pipes are thus smaller to allow for injection moulding. On the Airfix kit, the stack comes in 2 parts and it's much more accurately shaped. Here you can see the engine cover for the Napier Sabre on the KP kit. This would be different on the Mark II, which has used the Centaurus radial engine. This extra join does mean you can get some alignment issues though. What I do like on the KP kit is the moulding of the tyres on both this 4-spoke and the later 5-spoke sets. Much better than on the Airfix kit where the tyres are all smooth. The moulding on the instrument panel is pretty good. It is okay for dry brushing on detail. Of course the Airfix kit has its usual instrument decal. Now the drop tanks are included in the KP kit as well. In the Airfix kit, these are on the transparent sprue. Now, thanks to my viewers who pointed out that the Tempest had transparent pylon shrouds, I know the Airfix one's more accurate. The interior walls are much of a muchness. Perhaps KP has the edge on content, but not on sharpness. You'll also notice that the Airfix seat attaches to the walls because the floor is a part of the upper wing. On the KP kit, the floor is part of the cockpit tub with the seat. Lastly, for the cockpit, the stick is much better proportioned in the KP kit. Finally, in the wings of the KP kit are those reflectors for the ID lamps that then sit under plain glass. In the Airfix kit, the same effect is created by a moulded glass piece. Now I much prefer KP's way of doing this. There we have it then, the KP Hawker Tempest Mark V. There's many versions of this will be coming out, and there are many other versions of the Tempest as well coming out. Tempest 6 and of course the Tempest 2 with the Centaurus engine. Look out for those in your regular suppliers. Now, how does this stack up against the Airfix kit? Well, in my view, not great, to be honest. For a new tool model, which this is, it's not that good to put together. There's a lot of things which could have been done better, supplying some pre-drilled holes, for example. The instructions are fairly poor, but the actual mouldings are okay. The detail they offer in, say, the cockpit walls and the undercarriage bays are much better. The wheels are a whole lot better than Airfix's, but Airfix, I think, has it on the ease of putting it together. Details like the gun sight coming as a transparency rather than having to try and find a bit of acetate to cut it out with. The general fit and finish is much better. The decals are on another level. They're much, much superior to the KP offering. But that's cartograph for you. So, I guess people say, is it a good kit, yes or no? Well, much like anything else in life, you think, would I pay the same amount of money to buy another one of these? And I'm afraid, KP, no, I wouldn't, really. If I really need another Tempest V in my life, I'll buy another Airfix one and some aftermarket decals. So, a nice kit to build, don't get me wrong, not a horror, but compared to the Airfix, which is around the same sort of price, I don't think there's much of a competition here. So, that's it from me for this video. If you've enjoyed it, then please do remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to do that, there's a logo down in the bottom right there, just click on that. Come back soon for more model building. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.